This used to be a town of over 1,000 people. Today, it's a handful of residents, some empty streets, and smoke coming up out of the dirt. Because for the last 60 plus years, the ground under this town has literally been on fire. And here's the part that should make you a little angry: the government didn't put it out. It evicted everyone who lived on top of it. Welcome to Centralia, Pennsylvania, the most polite way a government has ever said, "not our problem." Before any of this, Centralia was completely unremarkable. Row houses, a Catholic church, a five and dime, and about 1,100 people who mostly mined coal for a living. It was the kind of town where everybody's uncle worked underground, and half the streets sat directly on top of abandoned mine tunnels that nobody thought twice about. Keep that detail in your back pocket. This part of Pennsylvania sits on some of the richest anthracite coal in the country, and by the 20th century, almost every town nearby existed for one reason: dig it out, ship it off. Centralia had been carved up into a checkerboard of underground mining tunnels decades before anyone living there in 1962 was even born. And a lot of those tunnels connected to each other like one giant unmapped basement running underneath the entire region. Nobody thought that mattered. They were about to find out why it did. May 1962, the town council needs the landfill cleaned up before the Memorial Day parade. So they do what a lot of towns did back then. They set the trash on fire. Cheap, simple, done by lunchtime. So nobody in that meeting is a supervillain. But the landfill sits inside an old strip mine pit. And at the bottom of that pit is a hole that drops straight down into the abandoned coal tunnels running under the entire town. Nobody had sealed it. And in the days after that fire, the flames find it. Historians still argue about the exact mechanics of what happened next. Some blame a missing fireproof clay barrier. Others point to an older mine fire from the 1930s that may never have fully gone out in the first place. But every version of the story ends the same way: trash fire, unsealed opening, coal seam, ignition. The trash fire goes out. The coal fire underneath does not. It's now burning through a coal seam that runs for miles, directly beneath people's kitchens, basements, and backyards. You'd assume this gets fixed immediately. Instead, for years, state officials and mining companies argue over one single question: whose budget pays for this? Not how do we put it out, just who signs the check. So the fire does what fires do when nobody's fighting them: it spreads. By the mid-1970s, people notice patches of ground that stay warm through the middle of winter. Snow melts on some lawns while the rest of the yard stays white. Basements start reading carbon monoxide levels that would knock you out. And in 1979, the town's mayor, who also happens to own the local gas station, dips a thermometer into his own underground fuel tank just to check it. It reads 172 degrees Fahrenheit. That is not a temperature a tank full of gasoline should ever be, for reasons I hope are obvious. But the moment that actually forces the country to pay attention happens on February 14th, 1981. A 12-year-old named Todd Domboski is walking through his grandmother's backyard, and the ground just opens a sinkhole 4 feet wide, swallows him, and keeps going 150 feet down, roughly a 15-story drop, straight toward the fire underneath. Steam and gas come pouring up out of the hole he's dangling in, and when they test that gas, it comes back as a lethal dose of carbon monoxide. His 14-year-old cousin grabs a tree root, grabs Todd, and hauls him out by hand. A 12-year-old nearly becomes a statistic in his own backyard because a fire finally ran out of patience. So now they fix it, right? Federal engineers actually run the numbers, fully extinguishing the fire, an estimated $663 million, buying out the entire town and moving everyone somewhere the ground isn't on fire, $42 million. So in the finest tradition of government arithmetic, they pick the cheaper problem, not fix the disaster, relocate the people standing in it. In 1992, Pennsylvania invokes eminent domain and legally condemns every remaining property in Centralia. Over 1,000 residents are told in writing that this is no longer their town. Around 500 buildings come down, the church, the corner store, homes some families had lived in for 3 generations, all demolished, not because the fire took them, but because a form got signed. But uh, a small number of residents simply refuse to leave. They fight the condemnation in court for years. In 2002, the post office pulls Centralia's zip code, like the town got broken up with by mail. And in 2013, Pennsylvania finally cuts a deal with the last holdouts. You can stay in the house you already own for the rest of your life. After that, the state takes it anyway, which means some of the last people alive in Centralia are legally living out their days in a town that still exists on paper inside a deal where the state is simply patiently waiting them out. Their houses now sit surrounded by empty grass lots where entire streets used to run, like a neighborhood erased with a keystroke, except the keystroke took 30 years. One of the last people to leave grew up 2 doors down from his own grandmother and kept living there right through the 2000s, mowing his lawn, decorating for the holidays, acting as the unofficial spokesman for a town that officially didn't exist anymore. He spent years personally lobbying to get the zip code back. He never got it. Eventually, the state evicted him too from a house his family had lived in for 3 generations in a town where he was practically the last person still following the rules of a place that no longer had any. Somewhere in the 2000s, Centralia picks up a reputation as the real town that inspired Silent Hill. The actual story is a little messier, which, if you've been paying attention, tracks the screenwriter for the 2006 Silent Hill movie did visit and research Centralia directly before writing that script. But the designer of the original video game has said on record it wasn't based on any one specific town. So Centralia didn't inspire Silent Hill so much as it got quietly recruited into the legend afterward. Hollywood did the research, the internet did the rest. The old highway that used to run through town, Route 61, buckled and cracked so badly from the heat underneath it that the state closed it in 1993 and rerouted traffic around it completely. For the next couple of decades, people spray painted every inch of that abandoned road until it looked like a mile-long rainbow, and it quietly became a genuine tourist attraction. Urban explorers, road trippers, influencers, all showing up to photograph the town that looks like the end of the world. Then, in 2020, so many visitors showed up during the pandemic that the state buried the entire road under about 400 truckloads of dirt just to make people stop coming. Read that back. A town got evicted for being too dangerous, and then the empty road it left behind got buried for being too popular. Here's what actually makes this story different from every other creepy abandoned town video you've seen. The fire never killed anyone. Not one death in over 60 years has ever been officially blamed on the flames themselves. What actually destroyed Centralia was a spreadsheet, a cost comparison that decided it was cheaper to erase 1,100 lives off a map than to put out a fire the town itself accidentally lit. And the punishment for the handful who loved that town enough to stay wasn't the smoke or the gas or the sinkholes. It was paperwork, eminent domain, a canceled zip code, a contract that politely waits for you to die. The fire underneath Centralia is expected to keep burning for at least another 250 years, which weirdly might make it the single most reliable commitment any government budget in this entire story ever kept.